Palestine, Israel, Gaza. The same headlines every day. Jews and Arabs in constant conflict. But have you ever wondered what the real reason for this war is? Actually, the roots of this conflict go back 4,000 years, to Abraham's two sons, Isaac and Ishmael. The events between these two brothers explain every conflict we experience today. And the Bible also tells us how this war will end. But the answer is not what you'd expect. Today I'm going to tell you the true story of the world's oldest conflict. It all began with Abraham. God had given him a great promise. I will make you into a great nation, and through you all families of the earth will be blessed. But there was a problem. His wife Sarai was barren, unable to have children. In that culture, a woman's worth was measured by her ability to bear children. For Sarai, this was a constant source of shame. God would later change her name to Sarah, meaning princess. But to Sarah, this name seemed like a cruel joke. How could she be a princess if she couldn't give Abraham an heir? Time passed, and when they reached old age, God's promise of children seemed increasingly impossible. Sarah's desperation reached its limit. She proposed to Abraham a solution based on the customs of the time. You see that the Lord has kept me from having children. Please go in to my servant Hagar. It was an act of desperation, but it brought immediate problems. Sarah, feeling inferior, began treating Hagar very harshly. Pregnant and humiliated, Hagar did the only thing she could do. She fled to the wilderness. Alone in the vastness, with her future uncertain, she didn't meet death, but a divine encounter. An angel of the Lord appeared to her by a spring of water and spoke directly to her. First, he gave her a command and a blessing. Return to your mistress. I will multiply your descendants so greatly that they cannot be counted. Then he gave her son a name. He shall be called Ishmael, which means God hears, because the Lord had heard her suffering. But then Genesis introduces a prophecy that explains current times. He will be like a wild donkey among men. His hand will be against everyone and everyone's hand against him, and he will live in hostility toward all his brothers. Think for a moment. This ancient phrase describes today's headlines word for word. Being a wild donkey wasn't an insult. In the ancient world, the wild donkey was the ultimate symbol of indomitable freedom, a fiercely independent spirit that submits to no one and roams freely. This prophecy described a people destined to survive against all odds, but also to live in an almost constant state of conflict. Hagar returned and gave birth to her son, whom Abraham named Ishmael. Finally, after so many years of waiting, Abraham held in his arms proof that God's promise was real. For 13 long years, Ishmael was his only son, his firstborn, the center of his world, and the heir to all his plans. In this child, Abraham saw the future of a powerful nation. The prophecy described Ishmael as a wild donkey, a fiercely independent and untamable spirit. Today, many see this trait in the pride and resilience of Arab nations. But the prophecy had two sides. It also warned that his hand will be against everyone and everyone's hand against him. This prediction of perpetual conflict is painfully reflected in two directions today. The prophecy wasn't limited to external enemies. The history of the Islamic world has been shaped by deep internal divisions, notably between Sunni and Shia branches. Modern wars like those in Syria or Yemen are tragic examples of this struggle between brothers. Years passed. Sarah, now 90 years old, had lost all hope in God's promise. She had resigned herself to her legacy coming through Ishmael. She felt that God had abandoned her. But suddenly one day, 3 mysterious visitors appeared at Abraham's tent. While 99-year-old Abraham offered them hospitality, one of them gave him incredible news. I will surely return to you, and Sarah, your wife, shall have a son. Sarah heard the conversation from the tent and laughed. It wasn't a laugh of joy, but of bitter disbelief. She no longer dared to hope. Abraham's reaction was also surprising. When God confirmed that the covenant would come through this new son, his first thought was for Ishmael. Instead of celebrating, he pleaded with God in anguish, "Oh, that Ishmael might live before you. This was the reaction of a father with a broken heart who loved his first son and feared the coming conflict. Despite everything, God kept his word. Sarah gave birth to a son, and Abraham named him Isaac, which in Hebrew means, "he will laugh." This name would forever remind them of their parents' laugh of disbelief. For a time there was joy in the camp, but tension was growing. The conflict exploded during Isaac's weaning feast. Sarah saw Ishmael mocking his little brother. Here's an important linguistic detail. The Hebrew word for mocking is the same root as Isaac's name. Ishmael wasn't just playing. He was challenging Isaac's place as heir, as if saying, "I am the firstborn, the true heir." For Sarah, this was the limit. Her reaction was immediate, and she demanded of Abraham, "Cast out this slave woman with her son, for the son of this slave woman shall not inherit with my son Isaac." The Bible says this was very grievous to Abraham because of his son. His heart was broken. God told Abraham to obey Sarah, but also promised that he would make a great nation from Ishmael as well. Even with pain, Abraham obeyed. The next morning he gave bread and water to Hagar and Ishmael and sent them into the wilderness. That farewell was the physical separation that confirmed the beginning of the spiritual rift. Abraham's pain in casting out his son Ishmael is a reflection of the past wounds that both peoples carry today. For many Muslim countries and for Palestinians, the creation of Israel in 1948 and the displacement of their people was a catastrophe. They refer to it as the Nakba. This catastrophe is the modern version of the expulsion of Hagar and Ishmael to the wilderness. To understand the difference between Isaac and Ishmael, you need to know the most important thing: the covenant. A covenant is more than a promise. It's a contract, a special and binding relationship between God and a people. But why Isaac and not Ishmael? The answer is a divine choice we cannot comprehend. God is very explicit about this. "Sarah, your wife, shall bear you a son, and you shall call his name Isaac. I will establish my covenant with him as an everlasting covenant for his offspring after him." This decision establishes a central idea in the Bible. Divine election is not based on human merit or order. Ishmael was born from the human plan and effort of Sarah and Abraham. Isaac, on the other hand, was born from a miracle, from God's direct intervention in two aged and barren bodies. The spiritual covenant is tied to the miracle, not to human planning. Isaac receives the covenant to be part of sacred history. Ishmael receives a blessing of greatness in the world, but of a different kind. God makes it clear that although Ishmael is not the son of the covenant, he is not outside of his care. When Abraham pleads for his first son, God responds directly. "As for Ishmael, I have heard you. Behold, I have blessed him and will make him fruitful and multiply him greatly. He shall father 12 princes, and I will make him into a great nation." This promise is fulfilled dramatically in the wilderness. When Hagar and Ishmael are about to die of thirst, an angel of God intervenes. Not only does he show them a well of water to save their lives, but he also repeats the blessing. Ishmael is promised power, descendants, and territory. He is the father of 12 princes, a parallel to the 12 sons of Jacob, who would form the 12 tribes of Israel. Surprisingly, the Quran and the Torah have different versions of Abraham's life. The fight between Abraham's sons continued after the separation in the sacred texts. Islam emphatically states that earlier sacred books like the Jewish Torah were changed by people over time. That's why the Quran presents itself as the final and correct message from God. In the Bible, the greatest test of faith for Abraham is when God asks him to sacrifice his son Isaac. This is a key moment that proves Abraham's faith and seals the covenant. But in Islam, the story changes completely. Islamic tradition says that the son Abraham was going to sacrifice was not Isaac, but Ishmael. What's the reason for this change? Because being the son of the sacrifice makes you the most important spiritual heir. By putting Ishmael in that role, Islam makes him the protagonist of the greatest act of faith. This isn't a small change. It's a way of saying that the true spiritual inheritance comes through his lineage, from which the Prophet Muhammad descended. This struggle to see which story is true has had real and violent consequences. The fight over the holy places in Jerusalem is the best example. The holiest place for Jews, the Temple Mount, is the same place where two of Islam's most important mosques stand today. It's like seeing one story physically built on top of another. For Jews, the famous Western Wall is the closest place they can get to pray at their ancient holy site. For Muslims, that same wall is known as the Burak Wall, where Muhammad tied his steed before his ascension to heaven. That's why control of Jerusalem is so disputed. They're not just fighting over territory, but over control of the story. But there is hope in the Bible. After all the history of conflict, the Bible shows a surprising scene that gives hope. When Abraham dies, the text says something key. Isaac and Ishmael, his sons, buried him. After decades apart and not speaking, Isaac and Ishmael come together to bury their father. At that moment, they are just two sons in mourning. A key detail, according to Jewish tradition, is the order of the names, Isaac and Ishmael. That Ishmael, the elder, allowed Isaac to be named first is seen as a great gesture of acceptance and reconciliation. This act is seen as a sign for the children, a prophecy that peace is possible. The burial demonstrates that despite everything, God did not abandon Ishmael, and both remain sons of Abraham. In current times, some events have occurred that have been interpreted as the beginning of mutual understanding. In the midst of news about wars, something that seemed unthinkable happened. Several Arab nations signed peace and normalization agreements with Israel. The most curious thing is the name they chose, the Abraham Accords. For the first time in decades, modern diplomacy deliberately invoked the common father of Jews and Muslims. Another little-known example is that the deepest branches of both faiths, Jewish Kabbalists and Muslim Sufis, often found understanding. Their goal was not to prove their religion was correct, but they shared the same goal: to dissolve the ego and unite with the divine. When the search becomes personal and spiritual, the labels begin to lose importance in the face of the experience of the sacred. The Christian faith presents Jesus not as a simple prophet, but as the definitive solution to the problem of human division. How does Jesus resolve the conflict? The central idea is that Jesus doesn't take sides in the fight between Isaac and Ishmael. Instead, he creates a new family, where those ancient identities are no longer the primary source of division. The Apostle Paul writes that Christ is our peace, who has made both one and has broken down the middle wall of separation. According to this vision, by joining Christ, a person receives a new identity that is above their earthly identity. They are no longer primarily Jewish or Arab, but part of a new spiritual family. This hope connects with ancient messianic prophecies. The wolf shall dwell with the lamb, and they shall not hurt or destroy in all my holy mountain. To break the cycle of hatred that began with Ishmael and Isaac, Jesus introduces a revolutionary spiritual principle. Love your enemies, bless those who curse you, do good to those who hate you. What path will Abraham's children choose? The path of desert hostility or unity before their father's tomb? Leave your opinion in the comments. If these passages interested you, get ready because what you just saw is only the beginning. Islam also narrates the life of Jesus, but in a very different way from Christianity, and the differences are shocking. Click on the video on screen to discover the differences between Jesus represented in Islam and Jesus in Christianity.